The morning my daughter learned silence has a sound. The morning my daughter turned 10, she woke up to a house that sounded wrong. Not quiet in the peaceful way. Not the early morning calm before life starts moving. This was the kind of silence that feels unfinished. Like something had been erased. I know that because I walked into it. I came home expecting chaos. Birthday chaos. The messy, loud, slightly irritated kind that means a house is alive. I expected to trip over a suitcase someone forgot to move. To hear arguing over frosting. To hear laughter mixed with stress. To hear someone yell my name from another room like I was supposed to have answers for things I didn't touch. Instead, I opened the front door and stepped straight into nothing. No voices, no movement. No background noise pretending to be normal. I stood there longer than I should have, keys still in my hand, coat still on, waiting for the house to correct itself, waiting for sound to load in, waiting for proof that my instincts were wrong. They weren't. My eyes scanned automatically, the way they always do when I walk into a space that's supposed to hold people. The corner by the door, where shoes usually piled up like a careless monument to childhood. Empty. The hallway table where someone always left a water bottle or a receipt or something they swore they'd grab later. Clear. The kitchen counter where mugs lived half-rinsed and unapologetic. Clean. Too clean. That was when my chest tightened. Not panic yet. Recognition. They left. All of them, including my daughter. I took a step farther into the house, slow and careful, like I'd wandered into a place I wasn't invited anymore. I called out, "Hello?" And my voice echoed in a way that made my skin prickle. It sounded like it didn't belong there. Room by room, the answer stayed the same. Nothing. And then I saw her. She stood at the end of the hallway, barefoot, still in the pajamas she'd slept in. Her hair was tangled. Her shoulders were pulled tight, like she was bracing against something invisible. Her hands were wrapped around her phone so hard her knuckles were white. Her face wasn't crying. That was the part that scared me. Her eyes were glossy but dry. Her mouth was pressed into a line that didn't belong on a 10-year-old. She looked like she was holding herself together through sheer willpower, like if she let go, something inside her would break. "Hey," I said softly, without thinking, like loudness itself might hurt her. "Sweetheart, what's going on?" She didn't answer. She just stood there, still, quiet, watching me. I took a step closer. "Where is everyone?" Her throat moved as she swallowed. When she finally spoke, her voice was so small it barely sounded like it came from her. "They left." The words landed wrong. Heavy. Final. "What do you mean they left?" I asked, already knowing I wasn't going to like the answer. "Where did they go?" She looked down at her phone, like it was safer than looking at me. "I woke up," she said carefully, choosing each word like it could cut her. "And nobody was here. I didn't know if you were. I didn't know what was happening. I felt something give way inside my chest. How do you know they left?" I asked. She turned the phone toward me, and there it was. A bright photo. Too bright. Too happy. Sunlight and smiles and bodies pressed together like they'd rehearsed it. Adults grinning. Kids laughing. The ocean stretched behind them, blue and perfect, like it had been edited for effect. And across the image, bold and cheerful, the caption read, "Family is everything." For a second, my brain refused to cooperate. I was standing in my hallway, looking at my daughter, trying not to cry on her 10th birthday. And at the same time, I was staring at proof that everyone who was supposed to love her had chosen something else. My daughter watched my face, not accusing, searching, waiting for me to explain it in a way that wouldn't hurt. I couldn't. My phone was already in my hand before I realized I'd picked it up. I called my husband first. Straight to voicemail. I tried again. Same result. I called his parents. No answer. I called his sister. Ringing. Ringing. She picked up with a voice that sounded bright enough to be intentional. "Hello? Where are you?" I asked. There was a pause. Just long enough to feel calculated. "Oh," she said lightly. "We decided to leave early." My stomach dropped. "You left," I said. "Without us. It was kind of chaotic," she replied. Like that explained something. I could hear laughter in the background. Movement. Other people listening. Chaotic. I repeated. You left a child alone on her birthday. Another voice cut in, sharp and confident. His mother. She was being difficult. I froze. What? I said. She was misbehaving, she repeated. Like she'd been waiting to say it. I looked at my daughter. 10 years old. Barefoot. Holding back tears. How? I asked slowly. Was she misbehaving while she was asleep? Silence. Then his father laughed softly. She's always been sensitive. And finally, my husband's voice. Tired. Irritated. Don't do this, he said. Don't ask why you abandoned our daughter, I asked. This is exactly the drama we didn't want, his mother snapped. My daughter made a small sound beside me. I stepped slightly in front of her without thinking. Shielding her felt instinctive, like my body knew what my mind was still catching up to. You can still come later, his sister said. Just drive down. Like it was an invitation. Like nothing irreversible had already happened. I ended the call. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was loud. I looked down at my daughter. Go put your shoes on, I said gently, and pick whatever you want for breakfast. She hesitated. Mom, are we? Yes, I said. We're having a birthday. She nodded slowly. At the time, I didn't know it yet, but that was the moment something inside me stopped waiting. The truth is, that morning didn't break something new. It exposed something old. Later that night, after the cake had been eaten and the balloons were slowly deflating in the corners of the living room, after my daughter had fallen asleep with frosting still on her cheek and a soft smile she didn't quite trust yet, I sat alone at the kitchen table with the lights off. The house was quiet again, but it wasn't the same quiet as that morning. This quiet felt alert, watchful, like the walls themselves were waiting to see what I would finally admit. And that's when the memories stopped lining up politely and started stacking. I met my husband when his older daughter was still a toddler, barely steady on her feet, curls bouncing, hands always sticky with something sweet. He wore single fatherhood the way some men wear humility carefully practiced, openly displayed. He talked about co-parenting like it was a moral credential. 50-50 custody, healthy communication. Putting the child first. On paper, it was admirable. In real life, it was convincing. I watched him kneel down to his daughter's level, listen with exaggerated patience, remember tiny preferences that made him look attentive. He packed snacks. He knew which stuffed animal mattered most. I fell in love faster than I planned to, and I told myself it was because he was kind. When he introduced me to his parents, I thought I'd been lucky. They hovered over his daughter constantly. Did she need water? Was she cold? Was she tired? They praised everything she did like it was evidence of genius. A scribble became art. A tantrum became expressing feelings. I remember thinking very clearly, very naively, if they love her this much, our child will be so lucky. Love doesn't always grow. Sometimes it concentrates. When my daughter was born, I waited for the shift people always talk about, the way grandparents' hearts are supposed to double. The way families say, love multiplies, never divides. Instead, it narrowed. At first, it was subtle enough to explain away. They'd bring gifts for his older daughter, specific ones, thoughtful ones, exactly what she'd asked for. Then they'd pause, look around, and say, "Oh, we forgot the baby," like it was an adorable oversight. Later, they'd hand my daughter something random. A toy still in plastic. A shirt in the wrong size. Something that said, "I thought of you last." I told myself I was imagining patterns. But patterns don't disappear when you stop looking at them. As the girls grew older, the differences sharpened. His older daughter's moods were phases. Her outbursts were spirited. Her mistakes were brushed away before they landed. My daughter, meanwhile, became dramatic, sensitive. Too much. She heard it. Children always do. I tried to counter it quietly. Praised her when no one else did. Celebrated her small victories. reminded her she was kind, smart, creative. But you can't outlove a room full of adults committed to shrinking a child, especially when one of those adults is her father. Because while I was my daughter's mother, I was also his older daughter's stepmother. And that distinction mattered to everyone else far more than it ever did to me. I wasn't trying to replace her mother. I wasn't trying to claim a role that wasn't mine. I just wanted to be a safe adult in her life. But every time I tried to step into even the smallest authority, it was taken back from me publicly. "Bedtime," I'd say calmly. "Oh, she can stay up," his mother would override immediately. If I enforced a rule, his father would laugh. "Relax. She's a kid." If his daughter spoke sharply to me and I corrected her gently, my husband would step in. "I've got it," he'd say, as if my voice were interference. It taught a lesson without ever stating it outright. You don't have to listen to her. And children learn quickly. The outings made it impossible to ignore. They took his older daughter out alone. Ice cream, shopping, special days. My daughter and I would stand in the doorway, watching. Sometimes my daughter would ask quietly, "Can I come too?" His mother's smile would tighten. "Oh, sweetheart, this is just for her today." As if my child were a neighbor's kid who'd wandered too close. I stayed quiet longer than I should have. I told myself it wasn't worth the fight. That rocking the boat would only hurt my daughter more. That patience would eventually be rewarded. Boats like that don't want balance. They want someone overboard. The real shift happened when my husband suggested his parents move in. "Just temporarily," he said. "It'll help. We have the space." Temporary is the word people use when they don't want to admit permanence. I said yes because I was tired. Because I didn't want another argument framed as me being difficult. Because I didn't want to be painted as ungrateful. Once they moved in, the house stopped feeling like mine. They rearranged things, commented on everything, corrected me in my own kitchen, treated my daughter and me like guests who had overstayed our welcome. The irony was sharp enough to sting. The house was in my name. It came from my parents. The mortgage, the deed, the responsibility. All mine. They didn't care. Control doesn't need ownership. So when my daughter stood in that hallway on her 10th birthday morning, holding her phone and swallowing her tears, something in me finally went still. Not numb, clear. That wasn't a misunderstanding. It was the clearest pattern I'd ever seen. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. That night, after the house had gone quiet and the memories had finished lining themselves up, I picked up my phone. I didn't scroll. I didn't argue. I didn't rehearse what I'd say. I made a decision. 3 days later, they would come home thinking everything was fine, and everything they thought was solid was about to learn how fragile it really was. 3 days before everything fell apart, I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I didn't send long messages trying to make people understand something they had spent years refusing to see. I did something far more dangerous. I remembered. Memory doesn't arrive all at once. It doesn't knock the door down. It seeps in quietly, filling the cracks you didn't know were there until suddenly you realize you've been standing in it for years. After my daughter's birthday, after the forced smiles, the cake crumbs, the moment she whispered, "Best birthday," like it was a fragile secret, I sat alone at the kitchen table long after the house had gone to sleep. The lights were off. My phone lay face down in front of me like an accusation. I picked it up. Not to scroll, not to argue, not to explain. I started calling. First, I called my parents. I didn't lead with anger. I didn't dramatize. I told them what happened. I told them my daughter had woken up alone. I told them about the photo. The caption, the call. There was a pause on the line. Then my mother's voice changed. Not loud, not frantic, cold. "We're coming," she said. "Mom, it's a few hours. We're coming," she repeated. My father didn't add anything. He didn't need to. His silence carried weight. The kind that meant something had crossed a line you don't negotiate back from. Then I called a lawyer. Not a dramatic call. Not a what if. A calm one. "I need to understand my options," I said. She listened. She asked questions. She didn't interrupt when my voice tightened. By the end of the call, I felt something settle. Not relief. Clarity. The next morning, I made arrangements without announcing them. I scheduled a play date for my daughter 3 days out. A long one. Crafts. Noise. Other children. A place she felt safe. I cleaned the house. Not obsessively. Intentionally. I removed the things that didn't belong to me. The photos that told a story I was done participating in. The objects that felt like someone else's claim. When my parents arrived, they didn't ask what I needed. They knew. They sat quietly in the living room, not interfering, not hovering, just present, a boundary with a pulse. The morning they came back, I knew before I saw them. My body reacted first. My shoulders straightened. My breathing slowed. The calm that comes when you've already decided the ending and now you're just waiting for everyone else to catch up. My daughter was already gone. I made sure of that. She didn't need to witness adults unraveling. She had already learned enough about disappointment. There was a knock at the door. Then the sound of keys. They walked in, sunburned and smiling, still riding the high of a vacation that had cost my child her birthday morning. My husband entered first. Relaxed. Casual. Like he expected forgiveness to be waiting in the hallway. His parents followed, already scanning the room, eyes sharp, searching for something to criticize. Then they saw my parents. My husband's smile faltered. His mother's eyebrows lifted. His father stopped short. And then, my husband noticed the man standing by the door. "What's this?" he asked. The man stepped forward calmly, professionally, holding a folder that looked far too official for a house that had spent years pretending nothing was wrong. "You've been served." The words landed heavy. My husband looked down at the papers like they might rearrange themselves if he stared long enough. Then the man turned to his parents and handed them their own packets. "This is a formal 30-day notice to vacate." His mother's face flushed. "What is this?" she snapped. "Who are you?" The man didn't engage. "My job is done." My husband looked up at me. "You're really doing this?" he asked. "Over a misunderstanding?" "A misunderstanding," I repeated evenly. "You left our daughter alone on her birthday." His mother scoffed. "Don't be dramatic." "No," I said. "You don't get to dismiss this." His father stepped forward. "This is our home too." "It isn't," my father said quietly. The room shifted. My husband shook his head, irritation hardening into anger. "You're embarrassing yourself," he said. "You're making a scene." And there it was. The phrase he used whenever I stopped absorbing discomfort. "I need you to leave," I said. He blinked. "This is my house too." "Not today," I replied. His mother exploded. "You can't do this to us after everything we've done for you." The implication hung heavy. My husband grabbed his bag, anger sharp and performative. "Fine," he snapped. "I'll go. Temporarily." He pointed at me. "But don't call me when you calm down." I didn't respond. His parents followed. Pride wounded, dignity theatrical. "We'll be back," his mother hissed. "Not on your timeline," I said. The door closed behind them. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was expansive. Later that evening, when my daughter came home, she stopped in the living room. "Mom," she asked softly, "where is everyone?" I knelt and pulled her into my arms. "They're gone for now," I said. "And you're safe," she nodded. For the first time in days, her body relaxed. The night they left, I slept in my clothes. Not because I was afraid. Not because I expected them to come back pounding on the door. I slept that way because my body hadn't learned yet that it was allowed to rest. For years, even in sleep, I'd been listening. For footsteps in the hallway. For a door opening too hard. For the subtle shift in the house that meant someone was about to tell me I'd done something wrong. That night, the house was quiet in a different way. Not the buffering silence from that birthday morning. Not the brittle shock of confrontation. This quiet was wide, like space finally opening up after years of compression. Still, my nervous system didn't trust it. I woke before dawn and lay staring at the ceiling, half expecting to hear criticism float down the hallway. A comment about the thermostat, the laundry, the way something had been placed incorrectly. Nothing came. The house held. When my daughter woke up, she padded into the kitchen barefoot. hair tangled, eyes still heavy with sleep. She stopped short when she saw me sitting at the table. "Is it just us?" she asked quietly. "Yes," I said. "Just us." She nodded, like she'd already known the answer but needed to hear it out loud. She poured herself cereal without asking, spilled a little milk, froze. I waited. Nothing happened. She looked up at me, uncertain. "You're not mad?" "No," I said. "It's just milk." She stared at the counter for a second, then smiled. Small, careful, real. That was the first crack in the armor she didn't know she'd been wearing. The days that followed felt unreal, like living in a house after a storm but before the news catches up. My husband sent messages at first. Short, defensive, carefully worded to sound reasonable while never quite touching accountability. "You're overreacting. We can talk when you calm down. You didn't have to humiliate my parents." I didn't respond. Silence is dangerous to people who rely on noise to control the narrative. His mother tried next. Not directly. She never did things directly. She went through relatives, friends, people who suddenly felt compelled to check in. "She's heartbroken. They don't understand why you're being so cruel. Family shouldn't turn on family like this." I blocked the messages without ceremony. My daughter noticed, of course. Children always do. One afternoon she asked, "Are they mad at me?" The question landed softly and hard at the same time. "No," I said carefully. "This isn't because of you." Quote, she studied my face, weighing my words the way children do when they've learned adults don't always tell the truth. "Did I do something wrong?" she asked. I set everything down and knelt in front of her. "No," I said firmly. "You didn't do anything wrong. Not then. Not ever." She nodded slowly, not fully believing it yet, but letting it sit. That was progress. The legal process moved forward with the dull efficiency that turns pain into paperwork. Meetings, forms, dates circled on calendars. My husband showed up to some things and not others. He fought harder over possessions than custody. That told me more than any argument ever could. When the custody decision came down and I was granted full custody, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired and sad in a quiet way that didn't need witnesses. He was granted visitation. Sometimes, when it fit his schedule, when nothing else mattered more. My daughter learned not to wait by the window. I didn't comment on it. I didn't fill the silence with excuses for him. Absence has a way of explaining itself. The house continued to change. Not dramatically. Not all at once, but gently. We moved furniture. Donated things that carried too much memory. Painted over walls where other people's preferences had been stamped too firmly. I let my daughter choose the color for her room. She picked a soft green. "It feels calm," she said. She slept better after that. So did I. Months later, I came across the photo again. The beach. The smiles. The caption, "Family is everything." I stared at it longer than I expected. Not with anger, with distance. The truth is, their lives didn't collapse the way people like to imagine. There was no public reckoning, no tearful apology, no moment where cruelty circled back and demanded a confession. What unraveled was quieter. They lost access to the house, to my daughter, to control. My husband lost the version of me who smoothed things over, who absorbed discomfort so others wouldn't have to, who made it easier for everyone else to stay comfortable at my expense. They kept telling their story. I stopped listening. And slowly, almost without noticing, I started telling a different one. My daughter grew lighter, not louder, lighter. She laughed without checking who was listening. She cried without apologizing. She asked questions. She disagreed. She took up space. One night, as I tucked her in, she said, "Mom? Yes? I like our house now." I swallowed. "Me too." She rolled onto her side, already drifting toward sleep. "It feels like it wants us here," she murmured. I sat there long after she fell asleep, letting that sentence settle into my bones. The house had always been mine on paper. Now it was ours in practice. 6 months after the morning my daughter woke up alone, I realized something quietly unsettling. I had stopped waiting. not waiting for an apology, not waiting for accountability, not waiting for closure wrapped in the right words. One morning, I made coffee, stood in the kitchen with the sunlight slanting across the counter, and understood that a chapter had ended without asking permission or offering a summary. Life had simply kept moving, and for once, it had moved in our favor. People like to imagine stories like this ending with fireworks, with someone collapsing under the weight of their own cruelty, with a final confession that makes the pain feel justified. That didn't happen. My husband didn't show up crying. His parents never admitted what they'd done. No one posted a follow-up saying, "Maybe family isn't everything after all." The world didn't pause to validate us. Instead, something quieter happened. We were left alone. At first, that felt strange, like stepping off a treadmill and still feeling your legs move afterward. I caught myself bracing for conflict that never came, rehearsing arguments for conversations that would never happen. My nervous system didn't know what to do with peace. My daughter adjusted faster than I did. Children are incredible that way. When the weight lifts, they don't ask where it went. They just stand taller. She stopped asking if she was too much. She stopped apologizing for crying. She stopped watching adults' faces before speaking. One afternoon, she spilled juice on the floor and froze. I waited. She waited. "I'll clean it up," she said quickly. "That would be helpful," I replied. She blinked. "You're not mad?" "No." She studied me, then the spill, then smiled. Okay, that was it. No lecture, no commentary, no shame disguised as discipline. Later that night, she asked, "Mom, yes? Why didn't anyone come back?" The question wasn't angry. It wasn't even sad. It was curious. I took a breath. "Sometimes," I said. "People choose what feels easiest for them, even when it hurts someone else." She thought about that. "That's not very nice." "No," I agreed. "It isn't." She nodded, satisfied with the honesty, and went back to her drawing. That was the moment I understood something I'd missed for years. I didn't need to protect her from the truth. I just needed to protect her from being blamed for it. My husband still had visitation. Sometimes, when it didn't conflict with his other life, my daughter stopped asking ahead of time if he was coming. She'd just ask, "Is today a dad day?" and accept the answer. I never spoke badly about him. I didn't need to. Absence has a way of explaining itself. As for his parents, I heard about them through other people. Complaints, confusion, stories that painted them as victims of an ungrateful woman who turned the family against them. I let the stories pass by like weather reports from a place I no longer lived. The house continued to change, not dramatically, not all at once, but gently. We painted over the last room they had claimed as theirs, donated furniture that carried too much history, opened windows without worrying who would complain about the draft. One evening, I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror and barely recognized the woman looking back. She wasn't smaller. She wasn't tense. She wasn't bracing. She looked settled. I won't pretend everything is perfect. Some nights are still hard. Some questions don't have answers. There are moments when I grieve the family I thought I was building, the version of love I believed in longer than I should have. But grief doesn't mean regret. If I had to choose again between keeping the peace and keeping my child safe, I would make the same decision every single time. Because here's the sentence that defines this entire story. The one that didn't come from anger or revenge, but from clarity. Family is not who shares a photo with you. Family is who stays when it costs them something. My daughter turned 11 last month. She woke up to noise, to balloons, to laughter, to a kitchen that smelled like pancakes and burnt bacon and too much syrup. She didn't wake up afraid. She didn't wake up checking who was missing. She woke up knowing she belonged. That's not a victory. That's a foundation. So here's where I'll stop talking and start listening. If you believe I did the right thing, if protecting a child should always come before protecting appearances, comment 1. If you think I went too far, if family should be forgiven no matter what, comment 0. No arguments, no explanations needed, just your instinct. And if you've ever lived in a house that felt like it was buffering, waiting for someone else's approval before it could breathe, you're not alone, and it doesn't have to stay that way. Thank you for listening.